No, I give up with that. Don't get me wrong, I like that they include it. I'm going to use my own. Hang on. Do not swallow the battery. I want to know why that's on there. What was the story? If you're watching this, Beelink, tell me who swallowed the battery. Because if it's a child, I'm not 100% they can read that. Hello and welcome back. And that is right, this is the Beelink ME Pro, the new 2-bay SATA and 3x M.2 NVMe NAS system. This is a very, very quick summary of my first impressions of this device. As some of you may already know, I'm off to Vegas. I'm going to CES, and this arrived less than 24 hours before I was heading off. So I wanted to do a very quick video of my first impressions before we come back and we work on the full review. I'll also be accessing it remotely. I'm going to be utilizing Unraid for the review as well as Zimmer OS. But first impression straight away. One, it is as small as they said it was going to be. Just to put it into perspective, here is the ME Mini. There behind it. As you can see, depth-wise, it really is kind of everything in there. Even height-wise, they are largely identical. If we go for the top there, you can see the depth-wise. Again, very similar scale devices. We go for the ports and connectivity there and bring those side by side. As you can see, they've gone for an incredibly similar classification in terms of physical scale. Now, when it comes to the hard drive bays, there's a magnetic panel there on the back. I quite like it. It does fit. I do think the guidance for how that fits could be a little bit better. But to be honest, it's still nice. You're not going to be removing it that often. The bays for each of the drives, they fit in nice and neatly there. They are screw drives that go inside there. It isn't click and load. All the screw kits are included. Actually, on the subject of screw kits, slight change of subject. I really like, when this arrived in this tiny little box. And when it arrived, I was like, where's the screws? Where's the network cable? Where's the power? Well, most of the components arrive in these tiny little boxes, which are inside the empty chassis there. I was really impressed with that kind of ingenuity when it came to logistics. It's not a big deal, but I wanted to touch on it. But the hard drive bays are pretty scant. They actually have a thermal pad based in the base there, which I was kind of impressed with. Something you don't really see in a lot of hard drive bays. I question the need for that, but then I think about the compact nature and using that horizontal airflow throughout the course of the device. So maybe they had noted during their testing that it needed some kind of dissipation there at the base of each of the drives. You can see it feeds directly onto those two SATA connectors there inside, which is directly onto that board. I'm not seeing any kind of operational fan there. This does take advantage of a vapor chamber there over the CPU with copper piping, which hopefully you can see there on screen. And that CPU is the N97 quad-core integrated graphics, 9 lanes to play with, which has really been spread out pretty thinly across this. But I will say, for the price point and what you're getting, it's still pretty bloody impressive. I'm interested to see what the scale-ups of this, and I'll come back around to that later on. But you can see that vapor chamber there on that rear panel, and on the base you can see those network ports. They did settle on 2.5 and 5 gigabit networking there at the base, as well as a few USBs. There is one on that front panel there, little USB 2 there. I will say I have mixed feelings about this front panel, because I really like the mesh effect there, like a speaker, and the logo kind of looks like a speaker, but it also is completely different to the official Beelink logo. I know not everyone's going to be in love with that logo there. It even has like the official Beelink symbol there at the top. Another thing, if we talk about first impressions there on the base, we've got that panel there alongside that removable Allen key there, which you use, by the way, to get access to both of the bays. They're locked in with 2 Allen key hex screws there on both of those, as well as the removable base panel. But I will say, hot damn, that is a fiddly Allen key. The Allen key, when I was utilising it, it's absolutely tiny. And indeed, to get to the base panel, you have to remove the rubber panel there, which does key in. But once you do have this incredibly minor, I'm not even sure the focus is going to pick this up, this Allen key, it's just a little fiddly there, and it's a sort of area where I would like to see a Phillips screw be utilised. Still, it does the job, and at the very least, the key is already built into the device. So if we remove that base panel, I've already removed the 2 screws. We've got 3 thermal pads there, which cover over the 3 M.2 NVMe bays based in here. That's right, there's got a 5 GBE network port, a 2.5 GBE network port, and 3 M.2 NVMe bays alongside the 2 SATA bays in there. So we've got plenty of storage to play with. I've not dug in anywhere near deep enough to go into the controllers and the throughput there and the lanes being allocated, but I will say across these 3 slots, one of them is Gen 3 times 2 and the other 2 are Gen 3 times 1. They are clearly labelled, and the spacing all the way through those thermal pads, forget using any SSDs that have got heat sinks, but at the very least, there is a decent amount of space there for those double-sided M.2 NVMe's, and the thermal pad covers it. Interestingly, when you look at the thermal pads, there's a very clear indication for a 4th bay there, and a clear slot there inside. Now that is going to be for the scaled up version, no doubt. It's going to have that AMD processor. I think it's the 8845HS, but I'm not 100% on that. But at the very least, you can definitely see they are going to scale up. But I will say one of the things that really surprised me is something I'm going to need to remove that base panel to talk to you about. The removable mechanism to get access to the tray is clean as all hell. It's quite tight, I will say. It does feel when it's inside there getting it out. I had to kind of leverage my fingers against those 2 little screw liftings there to get access to it, but it does slide out. I do think it could stand to have a handle. If you look at the individual hard drives there, they've got a little pull there. This doesn't have that. It could have been nice just to have that, but then perhaps it wouldn't have looked as flush there on the rear. And again, it feeds directly into there, that connector there at the back that it's all going through. Later on, when we dig in via SSH, we'll find out a little bit more about that connector as well. But when we look at here, I do need to report one of the things that has seemingly changed, or at least changed in the Pro N97 version, and that is that this doesn't have a SODIMM slot. Originally, when they were talking about this in Shenzhen, when I visited the brand's HQ, and again, they have supplied this unit and not paying for the review. They just supplied the unit. They're seeing it at the same time as you are. But I will say, there's no SODIMM slot for the RAM. This arrives with a 12 gig RAM module directly onto the board. Now, how much of that change has been applied by perhaps RAM cost at the moment and trying to go for a little bit more affordability, or that was always the plan and it's only going to be the more scaled up versions with the better CPUs that are going to have SODIMM memory slots? We'll have to still wait and see. But nonetheless, do keep in mind you can't scale up the memory. The CPU there is fitting onto that fan, which is fitting into copper piping there at the base. Hopefully shots on screen will show you. But overall, I really like the architecture of what we're seeing here and how well put together it is. I've just realised I've spent the entire recording saying the wrong CPU, but you know what, I'm going to leave it in just to show my ignorance. It isn't the N97, it is the N95 CPU. I'm reviewing another system just over there that you can probably hear that features the N97. The N95 CPU is near enough identical, I would argue, for most users. It's 4-core, 4-thread with integrated graphics there at 1.2 gigahertz, and as mentioned, 9 lanes to play with. There is a version of this system, costs a little bit more, that is arriving with that same N150 CPU that we found inside this device here. But right now, this is the only device I have got to review. I will also add, on the official pages, they have added that there is indications there towards not only an AMD version of this, but even an ARM version of this. They're clearly going to push out with this hardware architecture. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do. Another thing on the product pages that unfortunately during my early B-roll creation when I was taking photos and video for this is the Wi-Fi 6 support there. Because when I was going through this device, I forgot it has Wi-Fi 6, but there's no antennae inside here. The reason is the Wi-Fi 6 card is actually built inside the front panel there. I believe there is a screw just underneath that logo there. Now, I've not had a chance to take that apart. Sorry, I got a rotten cold. I've not had a chance to take that apart there, but I do remember when we were in Shenzhen, they were showing the original prototype for this, that the Wi-Fi card is just tucked into the bottom there with antennae built into the front. That's a neat little design choice there. It is a Wi-Fi 6, so again, upgrading it to say Wi-Fi 7 driver support, depending on your OS of choice, is presumably relatively easy, but getting into it, I think, is going to be another little bit of fun there, but that's something for me to plan when I get back. Pricing, on the other hand, for this device, you can't seemingly, at least at the moment from their own web pages, get a hold of this device with without an SSD inside. You have to get it with at least a base OS SSD. So the lowest price option there is the N95 with 12 gig of RAM, again non-ECC, the 128 gig SSD, and that's currently knocking around an intro price of $369, not too shabby. Now that scales up in terms of the memory, going up to 16 gig alongside the N150 version, and that starts at around $529 and peaking there at $559. So nowhere near as cheap as the low prices the ME Mini that we talked about before was offering. That's 6 times M.2 NVMe, but still not egregious when you're looking at the cost of NAS solutions. And maybe we could make erroneous comparisons there to like turnkey NAS solutions, just Synology and QNAPs or whatever. But in terms of DIY, to get the N150 version with 16 gig of memory, a half terabyte SSD for your storage, $529 isn't incredibly terrible. It's actually not too bad. When you factor out the $200 to $300, got you the 6 times M.2 NVMe with similar hardware specs. And this rocking out with SATA support there, this rocking out with 5GBE networking support there. There's a lot to love. But I'm still very, very interested in this whole idea of, on their pages, talking about swappable controller boards here. Because when you go on their web pages there, they do highlight in a bunch of ways that you can buy this device and then down the road swap the Intel base out for that AMD base down the line. Now, obviously, the only thing that's running inside this once you remove this board is the Wi-Fi card and these two SATA bays, so it's not that crazy. But it's the idea, we've always been able to swap it out to a new server, but it's the fact that it's done in a turnkey adjacent system, one might argue, or just simply that you're able to swap this out conveniently in such a mini form. I don't know how many people are going to take advantage of it, but it's an interesting proposition nonetheless. I will say, again, that slot-in mechanic, it does feel solid. You have to hit it in there pretty hard, but it does line up with it. And again, when it comes to the storage of the hard drive bays, I know they're trying to go for this really nice, compact design, but it doesn't feel smooth sometimes slotting these items in here. You have got, sub-millimeters to play with inserting some of this stuff in here. I know this isn't the full review yet, and I really like the design thus far, but I think it would be remiss not to highlight that slotting things in and out of this does feel very rough going in sometimes, and I think maybe some work could go into making that process a little bit smoother. It's still lovely. I do think the way they slot in and how flush they are, as you can see there, it has kind of gone in remarkably tightly, but I do think in the efforts to make this as compact as possible, maybe the odd extra millimeter that no one would have sued them for might have made things feel a little bit smoother going in. But how often are you actually going to do that? But frankly, I just love how tiny this 2-bay NAS is. I'll screw that in later on. Look at the scale of this. And obviously during our review, we're going to have to really pay attention to the likes of temperatures, power consumption, noise. I mean, I've got a couple of 4TB Seagates inside there, but I do think we're going to have to think about what bigger drives like your 30TBs these days are going to do. I'll put that panel back on later on. But stay tuned for the full review for this in a week or two. And I'll be honest with you, probably a little bit longer with CS around the corner. But Beelink as a new entry into their expanding family of NAS devices, I'm liking what I'm seeing, but again, this ain't no review. It's far too early. Let me know what you want to see during the testing. We'll try and fit what we can into the review, but I'm going to be focusing predominantly on temps, noise, heat, and some of the throughput of those individual drives and stuff. And when it comes down to running VMs in procs, when it comes to TrueNAS unrated stuff like that, that may have to be for the video that follows that. But for now, let me know what you guys want to see. Apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Look forward to the coverage of CES if this video has gone out by then. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Hope you had a wonderful new year, and I'll see you very soon.